evening. President Bongbong Marcos challenges Chinese Premier Li Qiang over recent clashes in the West Philippine Sea at regional summit talks on Thursday, October 10, as fears grow that conflict could erupt in the disputed waterway. Li met with the leaders of the 10-member Association of Southeast Asian Nations at their gathering in Laos on Thursday, October 10. According to a Southeast Asian diplomat who attended the meeting, Marcos raised the issue in the meeting with Li, arguing that issues on economic cooperation cannot be separated from political security. The Southeast Asian diplomat adds that Marcos said during the meeting that ASEAN and China cannot pretend that all is well on the economic front when there are tensions on the political front. Marcos further said that both sides should hasten talks on a code of conduct in the sea. Meanwhile, according to a draft summit chairman's statement seen by the Agence France Presse, ASEAN leaders repeated long-standing calls for restraint and respect for international law in the South China Sea during the summit on Wednesday, October 9. On Wednesday's summit, Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong said to his fellow leaders that South China Sea is a live and immediate issue with real risks of an accident spiraling into conflict. Beijing claims almost the entirety of the South China Sea, a waterway of immense strategic importance through which trillions of dollars in trade transits every year. But several ASEAN members, including the Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Brunei, also have competing claims to various small islands and reefs. The meeting with Li comes after a slew of violent clashes, particularly with the Philippines around the Spratly Islands. Chinese Coast Guard and other vessels have rammed, water cannoned, and blocked Philippine government vessels for the past months. China has for years sought to expand its presence in the contested areas of the South China Sea, brushing aside an international ruling that its claim to most of the waterway has no legal basis. 7 months since its last hearing, Senator Risa Hontiveros says the Senate panel on women is set to resume its probe into televangelist Apollo Quiboloy's alleged crimes on October 23. According to Hontiveros, similar to what was done to other resource persons under the custody of the court, the panel on women would ask the court's handling the cases of Quiboloy for him to be allowed to attend the hearing. Hontiveros says that some victim survivors who already testified against Quiboloy will once again face the probe, adding that there will be new victim survivors who will speak as well in their bid to attain justice. Quiboloy is facing human trafficking, child abuse, and rape of the members of his church, the Kingdom of Jesus Christ. The Davao and Pasig courts had ordered his arrest. Quiboloy is detained at Camp Crame in Quezon City after he surrendered to police authorities in September. The Supreme Court granted the Department of Justice's bid to transfer Quiboloy's sexual abuse case from a court in Davao to Quezon City to avoid miscarriage of justice. The Presidential Anti-Organized Crime Commission says the government plans to adaptively reuse Philippine offshore gaming operators' hubs in the country once forfeited. In a teleradyo interview on Thursday, October 10, PAOCC Executive Director Undersecretary Gilbert Cruz says they will collaborate with the Department of Interior and local government and the Interagency Task Force to explore options for converting Pogo hubs into facilities such as schools and government buildings. Cruz explains that the raided Pogo hubs are currently subject to civil and criminal forfeiture, which will eventually be turned over to the government. According to Cruz, it would be beneficial for communities if the government took ownership of the raided Pogo hubs, particularly those located in Porac, Pampanga and Bamban, Tarlac. Cruz adds the raided Pogo hubs can be turned into schools. Citing an example of how the government has adaptively reused Pogo facilities in the country, Cruz particularly mentions the raided Pogo hub in Pasay City, which is now converted into a detention facility and a rescue center. In July, President Bongbong Marcos issued a directive banning Pogos in the country. As a result, Pogo workers are currently applying for visa downgrades as they are obliged to leave the country by the end of the year. On Monday, October 7, the Bureau of Immigration previously said that more than 10,000 Pogo workers have already applied for visa downgrading. Senate President Francis Cheese Escudero says the Philippine government would have a hard time funding the mandatory Reserve Officers Training Corps if it were approved and implemented at present. In a press conference on Thursday, October 10, Escudero says he met with Department of National Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro, who informed him that the implementation of mandatory ROTC would cost more than 8 billion pesos a year.
Ayon kay Secretary Escudero, mahigit 8 bilyon ang kinakailangan para lubusang mapatupad ito sa loob kada taon. At para lubusang mapatupad ito, ito'y magagawa lamang sa loob ng 3 taon na mangangailangan ng humigit kumulang 27 bilyong piso.
Escudero, a staunch critic of the proposed mandatory ROTC, notes that the amount should instead be used for other pressing matters and not solely in one aspect only. The Senate chief admits that it would be tough to afford such an amount for a single program since there are other expenditures that the government needs to allocate funds for in the coming year given the elections.
But to give you an idea of what Congress will be weighing in deciding certain matters, 27 billion or 8 billion a year can actually fund a lot of things in the Department of Health, in the Department of Education, with the SUCs, with the Pantawid program.
Apart from divulging the amount needed to fund mandatory ROTC, Escudero says the Department of National Defense, through Teodoro, sought an amendment to the ROTC bill proposing that reserves should not be automatically enlisted. In July, the Legislative Executive Development Advisory Council tagged the bill on mandatory ROTC as one of the priority measures for passage by June 2025. The Philippines' mandatory ROTC was abolished following the death of 19-year-old University of Santo Tomas student Mark Wilson Chua. Chua, who allegedly exposed corruption in the university's ROTC program, was found dead on March 18, 2001. Commission on Elections will publish for the first time the certificate of candidacy of political aspirants as well as the certification of nomination and acceptance of party list groups to prevent the material misrepresentation case of a dismissed Bamban Mayor Alice Guo from happening again. According to Comelec Chairman George Garcia, the poll body will be releasing the COCs and Conas so the public could scrutinize the candidacies. Garcia admits that due to their experience with the case of Guo in Tarlac, the agency needs to be proactive. The COCs and Conas will be published on the poll body's website before the end of October. The Comelec has received more than 44,000 COCs during the candidacy filing last October 1 to 8. Garcia explains that the Comelec only has a ministerial role in accepting COCs and Conas of political hopefuls, adding that the poll body could only act on the submitted candidacy only when a registered voter files a petition against an aspirant. In a resolution on Tuesday, October 8, the poll body said they would file a complaint against Guo for violating the Omnibus Election Code as she allegedly lied about her citizenship since only Filipino citizens are allowed to run for public office. Guo is also facing complaints for graft, qualified human trafficking, money laundering, and tax evasion. She is likewise being investigated by the Senate over her alleged links to Philippine offshore gaming operators. Guo is currently detained in Pasig City Jail. Guo's legal counsel, Attorney Stephen David, previously announced that the dismissed mayor intends to run for re-election amid the charges filed against her, but she retracted her re-election bid. These are the stories you need to know today. I'm Neil Mercado. Follow INQUIRER.net on Facebook, X, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Reddit. For more stories, visit INQUIRER.net. Good evening.